Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. If you're an arachnophobe, look away now because it's time for some Shelob.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club, your event, or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description. So if you're watching this on the day of release, it's a Middle-earth strategy battle game pre-order weekend, and the Treachery of Gollum is the new journal, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on my copy and reading that. I'm going to be ordering it myself, but I've been very lucky, and Games Workshop have sent me the new miniature, The Path of Cirith Ungol Shelob and Gollum set. So I thought we could take a little look at the miniature. I'll tell you about my experience building it, and then I'll go on and paint it as well and talk you through the way that I chose to do it, and I had lots of fun doing it. It's the second time I've painted a Shelob. I do have a metal one. Full colour instructions, which is always nice to see. You usually get that these days, not always, and they were relatively easy to follow. I didn't have any issues. Larger base this time, 80mm now, I think sure it was 60mm before. Two other bases because you get a little wrapped up Frodo and you get Gollum as well. One single frame in the box, all neatly laid out. I didn't have too many of those moments where you're searching for a number and I get really frustrated, but that's probably more to do with my age these days than anything else. Cleaned up really well, hardly any mould lines that I noticed. Does have on the rocks some of those funny, hard to work out how they go together bits with no male or female sockets these days. It's wonderful when it all goes together, but it does leave you scratching your head a little bit sometimes. And I think half of the instructions or 12 of the parts were all rocks, not much left afterwards. There's one little extra bit there, but that's Gollum. He's a bit small, it's a bit hard to put together, I won't lie, but it looks pretty cool. The legs were a little bit tricky to put together in places, especially attaching to the rock, the plastic rock. And I've liked to have left it off to paint, but it would have been a nightmare to stick on afterwards with super glue without messing up your paint job, especially with all the little sort of bending and fandangling with the legs and things I had to do. So do be careful of that. If you think this is the answer to not having to try and get the metal legs on the other Shelob to stay on, well, it's still a little bit tricky, but it's definitely going to be a lot stronger once it's built. And a superior sculpt, obviously modern day sculpts, I think it's fantastic. As you can see, the size isn't wildly different, to be honest with you. It's just loads more detail on the new miniature, as you would expect. Gollum's really nice, very similar to the old pose. I like both. The new one feels a little bit more sort of like the design you see in the Hobbit film, slightly updated, and that makes sense maybe, but they're both good. I couldn't really pick a favourite. They're just slightly different versions of the same thing. Of the bandaged up Frodo, I actually prefer the old one. The new one's probably a little bit more scale appropriate in terms of slimness, but it's not really very exciting. So on to the painting. I'm starting off with a couple of layers of grey here over the black with an airbrush, and the plan for this paint job is to airbrush, it is to dry brush and sponge and to glaze. I'm not really going to do much sort of fine detail work with the hairy brush. I want something that looks quite cool, but using lots of techniques and things that make it a little bit quicker to do. So very much a gaming piece, which is the way I mostly paint and appreciate. Not everyone will have an airbrush. It's just the way I find it easy to do, but hopefully there'll be some techniques and things that you can still copy later on in the video, even if you don't use an airbrush, because there are lots of things that you could do for sure. In terms of the paints I'm going to be using, I will post them all up on my Patreon afterwards. However, I hold up everything that I'm using in the video on the screen, so if you want to make a note of it, you just pause the video and you can pop the paints down. That post with all the paints listed and a picture of all of the paints I've used is also a free version as well, so it's available to free Patreon members as well, so you're not asking you to pay any money for that. It's just a little bit easier than always shouting all the paints out, because I might forget. What I'm doing now, after I've added a couple of layers of grey, I'm adding a little bit of white to the rocks and a little bit of white along the centre of the body. I'm basically underpainting here. I'm preparing the miniature. Now some of this I'll completely cover with other paints, but it gives me a nice basis to work from. A little bit of dry brushing around, picking up the detail on the rocks itself, and then a little bit over the legs, trying to catch some of the edges of the carapace that are around the legs, around the top of the body as well. After the base underpainting stage, I applied some liquid mask with a rubber clay shaper. So the liquid mask is going on just the rocks here because I want to do some more airbrushing, and in order to do that without covering all the rocks, which I've got a nice grey scale base for now, which would be perfect for adding some weathering later on, it's easier just to mask it all off. And I use the clay shaper because it means I don't get a brush completely knackered by all the rubber that's going in there. What I'm using now is a colour shift paint, and it's one with a green metallic hue. And I like to use metallic paints when I paint certain animals. It's great for when you do fish, and it's also brilliant when you do insects and you want that kind of shiny, chitinous carapace on there. And I love doing it, and it speeds up the process here. You get something that's quite striking and eye-catching, and it means you're not having to layer up and do lots and lots of intricate highlighting with your black. Now I've thinned this paint, 2 parts thinner to 1 part paint, and it's very, very thin. So I'm airbrushing it on almost like airbrushing a wash on there. So some of that dry brushing is showing through, but I'm going to go back and build up some more layers in a moment, and it'll all hopefully start to make sense to you. Now I'm adding some black to the mix as well. I'm using a speed paint, like a contrast style paint, so a contrast black would work as well, like a Black Legion or something. Again, thinned, so 2 parts thinner to each part paint and equal of both colours. So I'm just starting to darken down that metallic paint. I still want the spider to look black and shiny rather than just a bright colour. And it will change a little bit depending on where the light hits, because it is a colour change, a colour shifter kind of paint. So when you turn it and it reflects, it looks a little bit lighter on screen now than it does into the natural eye as well. But I'm just slowly starting to add some of that darkness back, adding the black into the recesses a little bit and building the shadows up underneath, so it's not quite so metallic looking, and we'll continue to dull that down. By building up layer by layer like this, the intensity of that darker colour is hopefully starting to build up. I can see that there. Hopefully you can see it on the screen. And I think it starts to look a little bit more like Shelob rather than this shiny metallic spider. I was done with the airbrushing at this stage, so I can start to remove all of that liquid mask so we can see that rock underneath. It just means that rock now is ready to go for weathering and future dry brushing, and that's the miniature at this stage. So it's time to crack on with normal painting. I've got a white grey there, and I'm going to be doing some sponging. I'm using a little sponging tool here, and this white sponge is quite dense, a bit like makeup sponge. It comes in little cubes, so I'm ripping one corner off to make it a little bit more irregular, so to speak. And I've got some paint on my dry palette there, removed most of it, a bit like you would when you're dry brushing, and I'm just dabbing it on the face of the spider over the sort of the sores or the boils or whatever it is that's building up on her, the bits of her that's gone nasty, and a little bit towards the bottom of the carapace there. So if you look at the studio paint job and you look at it in the movie, there's some red colouring showing through, so this is going to be a base for that colouring area. Sticking with the sponging now, and I'm moving over to the little joints between the legs as well, especially on the top where the light would hit, just to give it a little bit of variation towards the edges of the carapace armour. Pretty much all of the spider's body is some kind of armoured form, apart from the soft underneath, which we don't actually get to on this miniature with the pose that it is. I'm sure some people will build it in a different way. There is quite a lot of nice detail underneath if you wanted to paint it. Moving on to some regular style sponge now, because you get a different kind of pattern, more little dots really rather than that smoother effect. And then this is all underpainting here. I'm going to cover this with coloured glazes and then really start to change the overall look of the spider. A little bit of dry brushing at the end to pick up some of the edges, and we're almost ready to move on to the next stage, which is a couple of yellow contrast style paints. And a lot of the rest of the video now is using contrast or army paint or speed paint to slowly build up, and because of the underpainting there, these things just work great. So I'm going with a couple of yellows, one a bit more ochreish, to build up those areas that have gone a bit nasty on her, the sores, the boils, the bits of deformity, whatever you'd like to call it. Once those are down, I've got a whole range of purples and reds and pinks here, and it's a matter of having them all out there. You can see they're all out in the palette. They've all been thinned 50-50 with a bit of a speed paint thinner, in this case a bit of medium, and it's a matter of just playing around with it. I like to paint quite organically at times, placing one of the colours in a little area, blending it out, wet blending it into the next colour, so you've got this sort of mix of coloration. And while this spider is very, very different to the studio art scheme in terms of it's not just plain black, it's got this metallic sheen to it. The colour placement of these areas is very much inspired by what's on that box art. You've got that sort of red and yellow markings areas, and while these are slightly different colours, I'm using that as the idea for placement and the kind of colour inspirations as a whole, really. By the time I reach the back here, I'm actually working with the lighter colours first, so the pinks and the sort of the purpley reds. And you can really see that white coming through still. And it's a matter of building this up slowly, layer by layer, so that underpainting shows through. There's a reason I put all that white there, partly so this shows up, but the textures that look quite rough when you just sponge them on start to look like they're under layers and layers of the armor or the skin, makes it look part of the spider's body, and that was the reason for it. So it's quite important to build up these glaze layers quite thin and then focus in on the darker areas where the shadows would be, rather than just building up completely. And it's a matter of just playing around with it. I didn't have a full plan, I just had an idea when I started doing this, and it's nice to paint like that sometimes. I definitely enjoy doing it. By this stage, I was very much just playing around with it and adjusting as I go, looking to see whether it looked right, whether I was happy with it, and then adding a different colour. So using the darkest purples to paint right into the recesses before moving on and using some of the yellow again, just to glaze out and blend some of the lighter areas, and just to add those different sort of tonal qualities there. So not forgetting that this spider is essentially black in the films, I wanted to make sure that I dulled it down a little bit more as well. So I've created a glaze here, 2 parts medium to 1 part grim black in this case. I'm just building up from the underneath out on towards the top of the body. So thin glazes all over, so that the other colour is still showing through. I don't want to just paint black paint over it, but it really just starts to sort of tie it all in a little bit more, and essentially continuing that messing around and playing around with the glazes over that metallic base. So this is a really bright yellow, and I'm going back to the sponging here. I'm using a regular kind of sponge, so I'm almost stippling on some extra marks and really lifting some of those yellow areas a bit more. I wanted to add a little bit more colour back. And you could do this when you're laying, when you glaze and then relayer and then reglaze, and it just builds up the textures and make it look a little bit more believable. So I'm adding this yellow also just at the base there on the back of the carapace as well, because it just felt like it needed a little lift in colour. And I think it works out all right in the end. And this time around, it's that brightest pink with some medium and cyan yellow again to glaze over where I've just stippled on all that yellow. I don't want any of it to look just like I've stippled it on. I want to smooth it back down and glaze over the top of it with those pinks and with those yellows. And again, it just lifts it all, adds some more variation, adds some more tone, and then blends it all back in with those extra glazed layers. At this stage, I didn't want to lose all of the shiny properties. I wanted to have a little bit there. So I've got a mixture of gloss and satin varnish that I'm just brushing on. And I'm starting with the satin first, and I'll go back with a little bit of gloss varnish in certain areas. Very thin coats here, just to add a little bit of shine to the body. I do like the idea of that sort of shiny armoured shell. It might not be for everyone. It makes it look a little bit more gross as well. My 6-year-old who hates spiders hated this when he came in to check on me when I was painting it, so I've done the right job of scaring someone at least. I find it's always nice to finish off with some effects if you're able to, and using a good blood effect, just to thin it down with a little bit of water and glaze it again over the areas that are wounded or sores, just to finish it off already. We've already got the reds and purples in there, so you don't want to add too much, but it just makes them look a little bit more glistening, a little bit more gross. Same with the same green effect as well. It's nice to just mix a little bit in there on those sickly areas, and you can hardly see it, and you probably can't see it in any of the pictures, but I've added a little droplet on the stinger, the poison stinger underneath her as well. Basing wise, I just used some base texture, lots of oil washes on the rocks at the same time as well, and 3 different types of pigment which I brushed in over the rocks and over the base as well. And I will include all of those in that paint list over on the Patreon for those people who are interested. If you're really interested in the style of basing, or maybe you're newer to the channel, I do a video on basing and some of the basic textures and things I use, some of the products I use, and some of the principles I use for most of my bases. I think all the products I've used on this are covered in that video, so I'll try and remember to pop a link in now for that one, so you can go and check that out if you're interested. Let me know what you think of the miniature. It's definitely not just the standard black. That wasn't what I was going for. I wanted that kind of, as I said, shiny, chitinous kind of metallic look to it, the sheen you sometimes get on beetles and things as well. I like that. I know it won't be for everyone. Some people want the more traditional plain black feel, but I had lots of fun with it. I did paint up Gollum and the little Frodo as well. Painted up very, very nice. I just didn't want to make the video a whole hour long by including those in the tutorial as well, but they're all good fun. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think.
Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much Games Workshop for sending me the miniature ahead of release so I could do some work on it and make a video like this. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the new miniature. Let me know what you think of my paint job in the comments below. It helps the video be seen by others as well. Do give it a like if you have enjoyed it, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Lots of stuff on the channel for lots of different game systems, including Middle-earth, loads and loads of Old World and other game systems away from the worlds of Warhammer and Games Workshop as well. If you like what you've seen and you'd like to support me even further, please do check out my Patreon. It's the very best way of supporting me. Head over to the Discord as well. It's a lovely, friendly place to chat hobby with other gamers, and check out the channel sponsor Counterattack Bases. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.